right, as a reminder and out of respect to our guest speaker, please take any personal conversation outside the room. It is now my pleasure to introduce Tom P. from San Juan Capistrano.
I'm Tom, I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be sober, grateful to be in your meeting tonight. It's really a privilege to participate in any group's primary purpose, and it's, we've got this kind of unique way of how we carry our group's message. And, this group brings in people to speak, and that becomes the message. And Scott, thanks for inviting me. It's great to spend some time with you and with your friends, and dinner tonight and coffee. And thank you for the wonderful welcome. I really felt that. A welcome to our new friends and to the people that have taken chips. And Raul and Molly, congratulations on those anniversaries, those milestones. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important thing in my life, and because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I get to have a life, and it's a life that one that I'm comfortable with. I wouldn't change a thing, and I know that it's because of Alcoholics Anonymous. We were talking about lots of things with Scott and the friends, and one of the things we were talking about was a photographer. And I was sponsoring a professional photographer. I still do. And he's really good. He's in New York. He's like high level. And he would, for a period of time, he would like take these candid photos of people, and he would like post them on Facebook with these very clever captions. And it became a thing. I'd look forward to this weekly post and see who he was putting up there. And one week, I see a photo of me, and it says below it, "What a nerd." And I thought, well, right away I got upset, and I'm thinking, what the? And then I looked closely at the photo and realized that, knowing this guy has a keen professional eye, I started to recognize that maybe what he saw was true, and it hurt. It hurt deep. Because all my life, I thought of myself as this kind of like hard to figure out, maybe a double agent, just always one step ahead of you so that you can never really figure out who I am and catch up. And I see this photo of me, and I recognize myself as a nerd. And, so there's a promise for you if you're new. I love coming to Ventura. It's a really special place. I spent some time going to a graduate school up north, and it was a graduate school and the course of studies was a mythological studies program, looked at from through the lens of depth psychology or Jungian psychology, and Carl Jung would be considered Bill wrote that he's one of the cornerstones of who we are as a fellowship and as a program, because Dr. Jung gave us what is our solution, and that is, I suffer from a hopeless sickness. It's a mind, body, spirit sickness. I don't know what that is until I get to you guys, and you guys give me some information. I've always used alcohol to treat my sickness. And Dr. Jung suggested that we all do that as alcoholics because we're seeking something. We're seeking something, and he said it's something in the nature of union with the divine. Yet we choose it in the dark spirits. And he says alcohol is termed spirits. We call alcohol spirits. And you get high. Yet it's a counterfeit. And so his solution was look for the spirits in the real world. And so the real world is the world that we live in. And, as a nerd, I like that stuff. I like reading about that stuff. I like, that's in fact what got me to go to that school in 2005. My sobriety date is September 6, 2001. Was I had seen in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd always been a seeker. I'd always been, reading and learning, and that I saw that in Alcoholics Anonymous, it seems to be that there's some streams running through here that have shown up in major traditions throughout the history of humankind, and so that's why I went to that school. The reason why I told you about that he saw me as a nerd is when I tell you my story about how God got me to you guys, I may not look like the person that's in that story. In fact, I'm going to be talking about somebody who still exists but really doesn't exist anymore because of what we do here. Our three legacy approach to sobriety: recovery, unity, recovery traditions, recovery, unity, and service. It's a three-legacy approach, and what that does is, I believe for me, and the doctor's opinion says that in order for these hopeless types to recreate their lives, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves. I believe what the formula for me to continue to ground my ideals in a power greater than myself is this thing that we have: recovery, fellowship, and service. And I came, like I said, I came to you guys in September of 2001. I was almost 44 years old. This year I turned 69, and I turned 25 years sober. So I was a little bit old compared to a lot of the people that I meet in Alcoholics Anonymous. I ran this thing a lot longer than I needed to, and but I didn't know that I didn't have a choice about that. I found out from you guys why that has to happen the way it does. And my first drunk was age 12. At 12, I was the oldest of 6 kids. My dad was a fighter pilot. We had been moving around a lot. We had just come through a period of time. 1970 was the year I first had what I consider my first drunk. I'd had many drinks before that, but first drunk where I experienced the effects produced by alcohol. Dad was a fighter pilot, and he got assigned into Vietnam. He was there 67 to 69, and during that time frame, we lived with my mom's mom in Chicago. So we had 6 kids living in this 2-flat apartment in Chicago, and if you can many of you guys can remember, those were some tumultuous times. It was pretty crazy times. 1968, Robert Kennedy gets assassinated. Martin Luther King gets assassinated. There's riots in Chicago at a convention, and I remember at these moms driving the 6 kids in the station wagon, and we get caught up in some areas that are there's fires burning, there's all kinds of crazy chaos, and I remember just seeing in my mom's face just absolute terror. And I remember that. It's kind of one of those memories, and I knew I couldn't do anything about it. And there was more, this thing about not being able to do anything about it starts to rule my life. I have a newspaper route, and I'm folding papers and delivering papers and reading the headlines, reading the stories, watching the news, and I'm seeing all this stuff coming on. It's usually about the war, and it's maybe about peace marches, and it's a lot of the stuff is making sense to me. Yet at the same time, my father and his friends were my heroes. I used to, as the oldest son, I used to be able to get to sit with them and listen to them tell their stories about what it was to fly those fighter jets and the things that they would do. And this is, my dad got into the Air Force in 55. I'm born in 57. So he's got a lot of experience by the time he goes to Vietnam. And he was in Russia, reconnaissance in Alaska, doing Russian reconnaissance. And so I've heard a lot of these crazy stories. And these guys with their courage and their daring and the way they drank and the way they laughed and the way they lived, which were my heroes. And I knew that they were doing what they believed was the right thing to be doing. And yet I read these articles and I just get these internal conflicts and these contradictions. And I couldn't straighten it out. And the other thing that was going on, which was probably the most pressing thing for our family, was that the plane he was flying was not necessarily well suited for the mission they were using it for. And over time, about 60% of those planes got shot down. In the early days, about 80% of those planes got shot down. They were flying in on low-flying missions trying to attract the surface-to-air missile fire, and then they could find those batteries, and other planes could come in and take them out. Because this was all new technology. Nobody had ever done this before. And so 60% of my dad's friends were getting shot down, and they were ending up MIA, POW, or dead. So 60% of my mom's friends' husbands. And so what it was like for us to come home from school, we'd hear, normally it was something like mom's crying. She might be talking to her mom, or she might be on the phone talking to one of her friends. And just over and over, and this impending doom just kind of settled in. And so I'm living in this impending doom. I'm supposed to be the man of the house. Dad says, you take care of the kids. And, I was not even 12 at that time. I was just growing up. And I remember just laying awake at night, not able to sleep, biting the pillow, so that my little brothers, we had a room. Our bedroom was 2 sets of bunk beds, 4 boys. And I'm biting this pillow so my brothers can't hear me cry, because I know that I can't do what I need to do. I can't take care of what I need to take care of. And what that transforms into is this constant thinking about myself, thinking about the world, and the conclusions I draw about that is that there's something wrong with me. Because I'd go to the school and I'd walk on the school ground and I'd look around and I'd see the other kids, and I know that they're all experiencing something, Yet they don't seem to be suffering from the kind of stuff I'm suffering from. I'm 100% sure that they're not staying up at night biting on a pillow crying. And even in my house, I'd look at the dinner table, look at my brothers and sisters. They all seem to be able to handle it better. And then somewhere along the line, I concluded that there was something wrong with me. And Dad ended up getting shot down. He got taken out by helicopters and came home. And we ended up at this base in Hawaii. And when you're in the military and you're moving around a lot, I think, as I've been around Alcoholics Anonymous now more, it seems like we all have this thing, this chameleon thing, that I will need to adjust myself to be what it is. In fact, before I came to you, my higher power was the expression on your face. Whatever it was that you did, that's the way I would adjust my life to accommodate that expression. And so I'm always trying to shift who I am to fit what I believe it is supposed to be out there. And it's uncomfortable to do that, because I'm never sure exactly what, I'm always guessing. And I make my mind up and I go through it and I don't do it right. And so I'm always feeling like I'm missing something. I'm about a half a beat off from reality. I can't experience it. I know now through Alcoholics Anonymous that what I was suffering from was self-centeredness. And in self-centeredness, I experience the world through my thinking. And in my thinking, I process what it is I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm always about a half a beat off. So when we get to this base in Hawaii, I meet some guys and trying to impress them. They asked me if I wanted to help steal some booze from the officers club. And I said, you bet I do. And off we go. And something happened to me that night as we stole we stole beer, we stole whiskey, we stole some cold duck champagne. And we had a lot of it. And I started drinking, and I started drinking fast, and I started having an experience. And I drank more, and I had an experience, and just something awoke in me. And what awoke in me, I believe, was hope. I believe now it was a counterfeit hope. But it was a hope that if I could feel the way that I was feeling in that moment, where I had courage, where I had confidence, where it felt like I knew exactly the thing to do in the moment, I didn't have to second guess myself. I knew that I could do life, because I had already concluded that life was big. It was way too big to do, that there was something wrong and I couldn't do it. I got hope that I could do life if I could feel like that. I didn't drink very well that night, and I was never going to become a very good drinker. I ended up getting 7 DUIs and arrested 48 times, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, about the nerd. And I started my journey, and now my alcoholism, it twists life. It twists my experience. I will tell you that those first 12, 13 years were a blast. That was rock and roll, going to country bars, getting a fake ID, playing foosball, pinball machines, trying new things as they come along, acid, mushrooms, and cocaine and speed. All this stuff comes on, and I continue to do it. And every experience is more profound than the last. And I'm certain I'm on the gates of heaven. I'm standing at the doorsteps as I have all these powerful experiences and see life in so many new different ways, and meet so many people. I end up following the Grateful Dead around and start getting connected with that world. And that's what I will tell you about. That's what my alcoholism will tell me about those first 13 years. What I won't, because my alcoholism, what it does for me, what alcohol does for me blinds me to what it does to me. I can't see the stuff that it's doing to me because of how powerful what it does for me is. And so what I won't remember is I'm not able to hold one single job. I can't have a job for more than 2 or 3 months. I'm getting fired or quitting from everything. And so I always have money problems because when you start getting in the world of recreational drugs and whatever, there's always money owed. And I try the game and I don't play the game very well, and I end up owing some people some money. My alcoholism won't remind me that I get in trouble with some people that I owe some money to. They take me to a place, they put my face on a curb, they stomp my head and knock all my teeth out. I don't remember that stuff. I don't remember that I'm not able to have one significant relationship in that time frame. Not one. I try to have, and I don't have one. I only have one buddy in that time frame, and that's a guy that drank and used drugs the way I used. So I don't have anything. I don't have any relationship with my family. I go to their events, I go to their parties, but really I'm just always on the outside of everything. My alcoholism won't remember that stuff. And then, then more humiliating things start to happen. I start to get in some problems with the law. And my alcoholism doesn't remember that stuff. What ends up happening for me is I come to my senses and I realize what I need to do is get married. And so I've managed to scrape through college. I've got an accounting degree now. And I have good examples of loving parents. I've always known I was loved and wanted. I know that's not everybody's experience, but it is my experience, and I've known that. We have dinner at the dinner table, and we talk about what it is we're doing in life, and what are our dreams, and how are we doing in school, and how are our athletics, and what are all that stuff. And we'd ask the questions, and we'd celebrate, but we always drank. We usually closed our dinners down by starting to give toasts to anything that begins with the letters in the alphabet. So we'd go through the alphabet, toasting to the aardvark. And so I decided what I need to do is get married, so I ended up getting my brother's girlfriend pregnant, and yeah, real nerd. So then we got married and tried to start this white picket fence life. And, I start on a path to become a CPA. I'm working for a big 8 accounting firm, trying to be the person that comes. But I'm described in the big book. I'll build a bright outlook for myself and tear it down with a senseless series of sprees. And I'll emerge again remorseful, swearing off, I won't do this thing. I'll sign the promises over and over again. And, and after 3 or 4 years, we're starting to have some problems. And she suggested I go to Alcoholics Anonymous because another friend of ours. So I go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. In fact, I go to 2 of them. And I remember coming back after the second one saying, I don't think that's for me. And she goes, why not? I said, well, they said, they keep talking about selfishness is the problem. And I buy everybody drinks. And she goes, oh, you do? Yeah. And they have a big book, and it's 164 pages, and it's not many pages. There are books with chapters that have 164 pages. And she goes, yeah. And I said, I think Alcoholics Anonymous is for people who don't like to share their booze and can't read very well. So I don't come back to you till 2001. And so we try to do this thing, have a couple daughters, and try to do this thing. And I try to put on the face that I believe it is that you need me to have in order to be normal and successful in life. I become a successful businessman, but I'm always having trouble. And always just the drunk. Most of the conversations I would have with people is your drinking under control? And I say, yep, I got it, no problem. And so I'm starting to hide, and I'm starting to go to the dark places and starting to disappear from people. And here I'm somebody who at one point is at a dinner with 14 other people, with the Vice President of the United States and 2 Colorado senators. I'm the chairperson for the Finance Council for the Diocese of Colorado Springs. Not a huge diocese, the Catholic diocese there. It's 28 parishes, and they had 2 high schools at the time. One of the challenges that I had on my term was we ended up having to close a high school, which is kind of a very challenge. So those were some positions of responsibility that I was able to get to, but not because of virtue, but because of what I needed to do, because I think if I could look a certain way to the world, then I'd be okay. And I never got okay because I kept drinking. And finally, my ex-wife, she comes to her senses. She ends up going to a facility to take care of some of the emotional issues that had come up for her and being married to a hopeless alcoholic like me. And she took care of that over 90 days. And she comes out and she realizes what she needs to do is divorce me. So she begins that process. And so I fight her. Because by this time, my primary skills in life are manipulation and deceit, because that's the only way I can experience. And I don't know that's who I am. I think that's the normal way to live. I don't know that there's another way to do this stuff. And I fight her over primary physical custody of the kids. In a time frame, over this 18-month time frame, I get 3 DUIs, and I keep them secret. I keep continuing them. I get different attorneys, and nothing comes to the surface. And I get awarded primary physical custody of the kids because I'm using as a weapon the fact that she's gone to a mental facility to take care of herself, and that she's not capable of that I'm more responsible parent. I get awarded custody of the kids, and I remember in that courtroom seeing the life in that lady's face, this beautiful lady's face just drain, like there's something wrong. And I thought to myself, I remember in that, yep, I want another one. That's just how I lived. Thankfully, God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And 3 months later, I got sentenced to my first 6-month stint in a correctional facility, and I get locked up. And my daughters go to their mom where they need to be. I do my time there well. I don't get in trouble, and I get out and I come back. We've got a construction company that's doing real well. My brother and I have formed up. I'm a great first impression guy. Great. I just can't finish anything. I get about 3 innings and I move on to something else. Well, Tim's a great finisher, and just to let you know, I've had 7 DUIs. Tim had 5. We've got another brother that's had 6, so we've got a little progression going. Daughter is getting up there too. I get out, and I've got no wife to worry about, no kids, and so I'm off to the races. It's kind of like my alcoholism hit the turbochargers. And I talk about some things, and I use it from this context, because I know there's sometimes some issues with what we call outside issues, but I don't think, what I'm going to talk about is outside issues, because we've got a litany of ways we use to try to control and enjoy our drinking. It's laid out in the More About Alcoholism chapter, about switching brands, beer only, going on trips, sanitariums, making promises with or without a solemn oath, etc. Down at the bottom of that litany, it says, anyone can increase the list ad infinitum. So I've got something that fits in the ad infinitum section. And that is, I was dating a lady by the hour, and she puts a little rock on a pipe, and she hits that thing, and her eyes split. She starts spinning around, and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? And she says, oh, this is crack. I said, well, can I have some? And she sponsored me into crack. And so I discovered that powerful stimulants, crack and methamphetamines, and used in all forms, smoking crack, shooting up speed, shooting up coke, helped me to control and enjoy my drinking. I stopped blacking out because by this time I've gotten 5 DUIs, and so I've got, once you're in the justice system with DUIs, it's hard to get out, especially if you can't do what they ask you to do, which is not drink. And and they tell you not to drive, but that's stupid because you got to get to where you're going. I'm already in trouble, so what's the deal? Driving is not nearly as bad as DUIs, so I have all this rationalization going on, and that begins the last decade. The last decade is this kind of craziness. It seems to me like it's insane, but I know today that this is not alcoholic insanity. Alcoholic insanity is not what happens to me once I start drinking and using drugs. Alcoholic insanity is what happens to me when I'm sober, and I go off the rails. After about 6 years before I get sober, I'm in a tree, and I'm probably smoking crack, and I get visited by the dead members of the Grateful Dead, and they tell me, this is a short period of time after Jerry Garcia's died, it's 1996, and they tell me that there's a movement to reunite humanity, and this movement, what will happen is Jerry Garcia is going to reincarnate through somebody, and because of that miracle, people are going to become astounded, and they're going to start getting along. They're going to dance and sing and have a great time, and they said, and we want you to be that guy. And I didn't accept it right away. I made them prove to me that they were serious over time. It's hard to take them very seriously because they're only like about 18 inches tall. But over time, after they proved it to me, I started on this process, and I believe that I'm reincarnating as Jerry Garcia. I'm absolutely a nutcase. I'm a person who, if you meet me on the street, I'm asking you questions because I'm not sure which side you're on. Some people are on the good side, some people are on the bad side. I'm not sure. I ask you coded questions, and if you can answer the questions properly, I know you're on the right side. But as it turns out, there's nobody on my side. And so I'm the kind of guy that's clucking and drooling and just out of my mind, and so I start getting arrested regularly. And it's not because I'm a thug like I see some of you back there. I can't show up for court, and I've always got warrants. And like the utilities companies would come to the house. I'll tell you why the utilities company would come to the house. Well, usually to shut off the electricity or the gas or whatever, but sometimes to turn it back on when I found some money to pay it or put it together. One night I'm out and I've seen a spaceship. And I've seen this before. My house is about 10 miles from Cheyenne Mountain, and Cheyenne Mountain is actually a physical mountain that houses the military facility. And the facility at the time, housed the North American Air Defense Command. So it was a major deal, and you'd expect to see spaceships around it because that's the place you'd want to monitor if I was a spaceship guy. And I see this, and I'd seen them before, but this time it comes down and it locks onto see how these, you got these telephone poles with out there, they weren't the concrete kind, they were the wood telephone poles, and my street light was on top of it. And this thing comes down and like latches on, and I'm not sure if it was like refueling or data mining, or I knew it was up to no good. And so I went into action because, as you can tell, I'm a community-minded guy. And I get an axe, and I start chopping down on one side. I get a wedge on one side, I whip around the other side, and I swing the axe, and I hit a conduit that carries the power from the ground up, and the conduit starts sparking, the lights spark, it goes out, the lights in the neighborhood go out, and now I'm just chopping away in the dark. And, as a vodka-drinking crackheads, we're not real productive. We make a lot of plans, we don't get much done. And I'm chopping away, and I probably had boxer shorts and a tank top on because that was my usual uniform. I'm pretty sure I didn't have my teeth in because I would learn that when I'm out in the yard and I see some little rocks, I start crawling and looking at the rocks. I sometimes lose my teeth, and so I would keep the teeth inside. So I probably didn't have my teeth in, and a utility truck shows up. They get me in the spotlight. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning. They're coming here to get the lights turned back on, and we have a little conversation, and from that point on, they brought the police with them every time. And after about the 10th arrest on something like this, I said, "Why do you guys always bring the police? I'm not trying to hurt anybody." He says, "Well, the file says that the owner is unpredictable and easily provoked. Must bring the police to this address." And so most of the arrests that I had, of those 48, were failure to appears. I was just a nuisance. I wish I was more of a hardcore. I'd like you to think that, but the truth is I was just a mess. And I'm going to fast forward to September 5th, 2001. I had a moment of clarity, and the moment of clarity was I had made a mistake. I drank half a fifth of vodka, and all the vodka was gone. I'd already cleaned out a bunch of baggies, shot up everything that was left, pushed all the pipes, there was nothing left. And I realized I needed to get more. And God gave me a thought, and the thought was, what's the use? You always run out. You're going to run out again. What's the use? And my next thought was mine, and I put a rope around my neck, put it up to a rafter, stood on a little chair like that, and kicked the chair over so I wouldn't have to do this anymore. And somehow God, had a different plan for me. And I came to, that rope was broken, and I was in a fetal position on the floor, and that began my journey to you guys. Now, I didn't jump up and go get the yellow pages for Colorado Springs and find out where AA Central office is. I think I scrounged around and got some food, and I went to sleep for 3 or 4 days, because that's generally what would happen for me. When I hit the end of these runs, I'd hit sleep for 3 or 4 days, because I'd be up for like 6, 7, 8, 9 days. And when I came to, my ex-wife was at the house with her husband, and it was September 11th, 2001. They had my 2 daughters and their 4 kids, and they hadn't seen me for a long time, and they came and they found me. And I wasn't able to walk. My leg had swollen up. My ankle was the size of a volleyball from infections and stuff, all these scars and holes and all the things that happens to us when we're walking in glass and picking at stuff. And they take me to her house, and I detoxed there. They didn't take me to the hospital because they knew I wouldn't go to the hospital. Last time I had been to the hospital, I always end up in jail anytime I get taken to places like that. I had been in probably 7 or 8 insane sanitariums where they would pick me up off the streets. Most of them were 3-day holds. There was one that was not a 3-day hold, where they held me and they put me in front of a judge, and before the judge had to rule on whether I was competent. That became my life. And when at that point, I told you about how my first drunk gave me hope. When I had my last drink, there was no hope left. Alcohol had taken every bit of hope out of me. Alcoholism had done its job. There was nothing left. I gave myself complete to alcoholism, and I still failed. I couldn't even kill myself. And somehow I end up on a twin prop flown down to Chandler, Arizona, about 3 or 4 days after they opened the air lanes after 9/11, because they weren't letting people fly. And I couldn't fly commercial because I had 5 warrants. And after 9/11, they stopped letting people with warrants fly in planes. And so the world changed, and I ended up down at a place where my youngest brother had been through there 4 years prior to that, and he had stayed sober, and he's still sober. He'll be 29 years sober this year. And I end up in this place, and they give me the rules. I've already detoxed. They tell me my chores. They tell me how this thing's going to work. They give me a big book. They're telling me they're going to assign me to a temporary spiritual advisor. I'm going to work with this person throughout the time that I'm there. I have to go to meetings every day. And if I don't like these rules, they told me, these doors don't lock, and you're welcome to leave. And I remember when they told me that, it just shook me up. Like, I'm welcome to, because any of the places I was put in, the doors were never unlocked. I was never welcome to leave. And they never really wanted you there anyway, but at this place, it seemed like they wanted me to be there, but they told me I could leave, so. And that began my journey, and I remember hearing a lady tell her story about finding her dad dead on her basement floor when she was 13. And when she told her story, it's kind of like God opened my ears, and I started to hear this message. And I started to hear what it was like for a woman to be a hopeless alcoholic, as she described the next years of her life after that brought her to the place she was at. And she described being beginning her life with hope and dreams, and finding the man of her dreams, getting married, having kids, getting a perfect career, beautiful house in San Diego, all this stuff. But her alcoholism is always there, always just opening and tearing things down. And at some point, her husband leaves. At some point, she loses her job, she loses her kids, she loses the house, she ends up homeless on the streets of San Diego, doing whatever she could do to get the first drink, the next drink, whatever. And she talks about being beaten, being raped, all the things that happened, how she has to sell her body to get a drink. And as she told her story, I realized she was telling my story. It just had a different earth suit on it. And that I had done the same kinds of things. And in the midst of that awareness, I believe God gives us that awareness, and I believe that's how this grace thing works. In the midst of that awareness, another thought followed, and the thought was, I'm absolutely screwed, because I became aware the only gift I was capable of giving the two people I loved and cared most about in this life was the same gift she had received from her father. And my daughters, maybe at some point, were going to be sitting in a chair telling that same kind of story. And when my oldest daughter first got sober, they've both been sober once, and then both have gotten loaded, they're both sober again. When I heard my first daughter tell her story when she was 4 or 5 years sober, I was not ready to hear about that, being beaten, being raped, all the stuff that happens behind alcoholism. But thank God we've got tools. Our big book gives us some instructions, and so a lot of ways to get free of the torment, of the tyranny of our selfishness. And one of them is cling to the thought that in God's hands, our dark past may be our greatest asset. It may be sometimes it's our only asset, because it may be the thing that can avert death and misery for some and bring life and happiness to others. We have this process of reconciliation and healing, and then that's the steps. They are profound, but there's synthesized actions that have come from many different, that work perfectly for us. That obviously God granted through Bill the way that he did, through Bill's white light experience and the time that he was laying on that couch when he started writing this stuff down. And I began my journey. That afternoon, a man came to the facility, and he asked if anybody wanted to go to a men's meeting with him, and I raised my hand along with 2 other men. And I ended up in a meeting in Tempe, Arizona, and I believe I encountered what Alcoholics Anonymous really is. In the 12 and 12, in the 12th step, it says that the joy of living opens with the joy of living is the theme of the 12th step. Actions is key word. We practice these principles in all our affairs so that we might achieve emotional sobriety, and so that those about us might achieve some emotional sobriety, which is an interesting idea, that when we start to achieve emotional sobriety, those about us start to experience some emotional sobriety. It says, but when the 12 steps is seen in its full implication, what we're really talking about is love that's beyond price. And I believe that's what our unity traditions create. Bill wrote that unity is our most cherished quality. And I believe unity is really love beyond price. And for me, I experience it in many different ways. It's not the kind of thing that I grew up with in film or literature. It's not that kind of love. I think it's way deeper than that, the love that's beyond price. And that first meeting, what I experienced, and it's the same thing I experienced here, was an unreasonable kindness. Like, you are unreasonably kind because there's no reason to be kind to me. I didn't merit kindness. Yet when I met you guys, that's what you gave me. You gave me kindness in spite of my brokenness. And I came to know that your kindness comes from the broken place to begin with. We've all been broken. And what we're doing here is coming from that place, because that's the place where God gets to come in. God gets to come in through my brokenness, not through my virtues. And so I start to experience grace. I know I'm here because of God's grace. I know that by God's grace, I was brought to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Through the process of Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was brought back to God. And how I was brought back to God is by grace. And now grace doesn't just magically transport me. What it does is gives me an awareness in the moment, this very moment, of what it is that I can be doing. In the early days, it was little bite-sized morsels. You know, I can handle a lot more today. I get it on a much more regular basis, and I can dance with it much easier today. Back then, it's not. I could barely move through that. I get these little, I get this idea that you guys are doing something, and it makes sense to me at this first meeting. And so what I do is I become willing to go to another meeting. And I don't think I can create that willingness. I believe that's God's grace creating that willingness. And so I leave that first meeting with the idea that I can go to another meeting. Now, this love that's beyond price, I think it has more aspects. And another aspect that's always really affected me in Alcoholics Anonymous is like a deep wisdom. There's a wisdom that's here, and it comes out of experience. It's the things that you would talk about. And it's wisdom related to the human condition. And you guys started talking about spiritual malady, and I started being able to hear it. And I started to understand what you talked about spiritual malady when you talked about the way I think. And you asked me to do an inventory, and I write an inventory, and I begin with the way I think, and the way I think is resentfully. I blame and I resent. And I go through a process, and I have some experiences around that. I share it with another person, and I get to discover that I'm not alone, that I'm not the only one that has suffered from these things. And I meet a sponsor, and the sponsor just gets put in my life. I go to a meeting leave there, I go to a meeting in California, I come with some names on a little notebook I'm carrying in I get to a meeting in San Clemente, and of course they're doing it wrong because I'm 30 days sober and I've got the answers. And I'm deciding how this thing's supposed to be really working, and this guy booms up from the back and says, "Hello, my name is David B. I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict." I look back, I see this old black man. I said, how do I know him? I don't recognize him. He's very distinctive looking, and I don't recognize his very distinctive voice, but I know his name because he used his full name. And he shares and he touches my heart, and I go to him after the meeting. I said, "David, is your phone number 949-768-3791? He goes, "Well, yes, it is." And I asked David to be my sponsor, and David became my sponsor. He took me through the big book. He introduced me to the fellowship. He introduced me to how the traditions work. He introduced me to these things called service concepts and the opportunity to be of service. He got me involved really, really fast. I fell in love with this thing. And then there was another part of what I believe is this love that's beyond price, and that is there's humor. And I remember hearing this, and it struck me, let us laugh at you until you can laugh at yourself. Because I could never laugh at myself. I was always taking myself very seriously. And if you laughed at me, it was a problem. And I would usually have to hide. And I heard that, and I started listening, because I'm laughing all the time. And I'd hear you guys talk, and you guys would say things. Not only was it deep wisdom, but it would either bring up tears or would bring up laughter. And I realized that you were touching me in places that I couldn't touch, deep down inside, deep down in the area of maybe what we call the soul, something like that. And I bought into your program. I did your steps. I turned myself into the state of Colorado. I cleaned up all those warrants. And in the process, I continued to have God revealing himself to me. And I should say it like this: it's a power beyond my understanding continued to reveal it. Because the power of my own understanding is simply a projection. It's me just making something up, and I make lots of stuff up, and it's just another one of the things. But there's a power beyond my understanding, and that's the one I'm striving for. And what I try to be is open to that power. That power has never not been with me. It's always been with me. The only problem is I get blocked from it. Pomp, glamour, worship of other things, our book says. And you've given me some tools to deal with that stuff. And so I got all that. When I got locked up, I was supposed to be locked up for a longer period of time. They let me out after 6 months, but that 6 months was the entire time was a 23-hour lockdown. I was in a maximum security facility in southeast Denver, and God showed up and showed me some things. And what I knew when I was in there was that the only thing different I had done in my life was you. I'd done what you guys had said, and I had turned myself in knowing it was a 9-step activity. I knew I was in there doing the 9th step, and that God showed up in the way that those promises. And it wasn't always how I would imagine it would have shown up. But what I ended up with was an internal sense of peace, at restness, a comfortability with being in life. And So I got out and I came back. My sponsor put me to work. I ended up in service in another fellowship, and I ended up being the treasurer for the World Service Office. I became the chair, and I ended up over time as the delegate, and then I became a trustee for that fellowship. And so I got really deeply grounded in our three legacy approach to sobriety, this three legacy spirituality that we have. And my life had got profound. I was celibate for the first 11 years, and the reason for that was I had early on this lady I respected. She had probably 55 years sober, and I would go to a morning meeting with her. And she said, if you're out there and you're sick and you're getting in a new relationship, all you're going to bring to that new relationship is that sickness. And I was tired of being the sickness. And so I committed myself not to be in any relationships. And so I just completely consciously stayed out of relationships. And then I got locked up, and I was grateful not to be in a relationship. How God does that for us. And I got out, and I just got really busy in action and sponsoring lots of guys. I would hear a fifth step almost every week. And God took care of me, and it wasn't like a longing that I was trying to satisfy, but it would come up every once in a while. And I started dating a girl after 11 years, and it didn't work out after about 3 years, and we split our ways. And so after 2021, I had rotated off as a trustee. I was done. I had done fulfilled my commitments there. I'd done 16 years of service, rotating in the process, loving the spirit of rotation that we get in our traditions. And I remember I was driving. I was starting to play a lot of golf. I was traveling to places. I had 6 grandkids. I was reconciled with my daughters. They were both sober. It was really cool. Life was going good. And I was just thinking to myself, this is a good life you've given me, God. And what popped in my mind was the 12 and 12. And there's a line in there about some of our members remain single and unburdened by marital responsibilities. They render prodigies of service. Well, thank you, God. That's exactly the person. Because I would have longings about relationships. And so that's where I am. That's what I'm thinking about as I'm going on. In 2024, a friend of ours, a friend of mine, her husband had passed away in 2022. And I had seen her at the memorial. And I went to this, I spoke at a meeting in Bellflower and saw her there and said, "Oh my God, Duffy, you look great." And then her friend came up to me and said, "Duffy has a crush on you. You should give her a call." Well, Duffy did not have a crush on me. And then she went to Duffy and said, "Tom's into you. He might be giving you a call." And so I called her, and we got together, and at our first coffee, we just sat on the same side of the table, started talking about our meditation practices and our morning practices. And that's where our began, and we opened our time together with a prayer, and we closed it with a prayer, and that's it. And so we were and then got really kind of connected and realized that there was something going on here. And we were going on a date on a Monday afternoon. We were going to a beach in Laguna Beach, and I picked her up in Placentia and driving down there, and just out of the blue, we've been dating for like 4 or 5 months. I said, "Would you ever get married again?" And she goes, "Yeah, I would, to you." She goes, "I like being a partner, and I know I'm a good partner." And I thought, well, that's an interesting conversation. And so now we have more to talk about. And we get down there, and we're at the beach. It's September. Everybody's gone back to school, and it's back to being nice and quiet and, the way that it's supposed to be. And we're there, and one of those planes comes flying by with a banner on the back, and on the banner it's supposed to say Pacifico or Modelo or something. It says, "Mackenzie, will you marry me?" And I said, "Oh my God, they got your name wrong." That was manipulation and deceit in a good way. And we began. So a year ago in May, we got married, and at our wedding, we had 12. We've got 12 grandkids between us and 4 kids, and that's our life today. And I'll close with this. And so we are both into. She's 46 years sober. So what I should tell you is I got 13th step. Or she'll say he swept in right after my husband died. But we go to retreats together. We loved going to conferences, and one of the conferences we went to is a Christian contemplative conference about meditation. And at this conference, there's a speaker. His name is James Finley. He's a therapist. His wife had long-term sobriety, so he's got a lot of familiarity with AA. And in the midst of the conference, he says, if you're in AA, just trust you're standing in a lineage of unfolding wisdom. And I love that idea, that we're standing in a lineage of unfolding wisdom. Each one of us contributes to this wisdom. We bring our experience, our brokenness, and something new comes out of it. And he closed it with this, and I'm going to close it with this as well. He said that, AA is both like a hospice and a maternity ward. Because in a hospice, what you have is people who are lovingly caring for this soul to move into the next world. And they're doing the work necessary to have it. And in a maternity ward, what you have is people lovingly caring to bring that life into this world. And what we do here, for our new friends, is there's somebody out there who's going to come in here, and they're going to be new, and you're going to have 20 days, 30 days, 6 months, a year, whatever it is. And you're going to be able to stand there. You're going to be that person who's going to be with them, because we know that something about us has to die when we come in here, so that something new can be reborn. And our job is to stand on both sides with both hands out, being able to make that stuff happen. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, let's thank our speaker again.